Her stage name is Elvira. Bouffant black hair, a cascade of lashes, a laugh that cuts like a razor wrapped in satin. To the cameras, she is menace and mischief. To the merchandise, she is a silhouette pressed into Halloween bins across America. But the woman beneath the wig is Cassandra Peterson, a survivor, a chameleon, a small-town girl whose life became a midnight fable. It begins, oddly enough, with a kitchen and a single careless moment. At 2 years old, she was scalded, a pot overturned, a child burned, skin rearranged by flame. The scars would grow with her, and the memory of pain would become a quiet engine. It taught a young Cassandra something visceral about the body and about hiding. Where others saw only injury, she learned to see costume. Where others saw shame, she learned to cultivate mystery. There is a symmetry to her story. A girl from Manhattan, Kansas, drawn to shadow and spectacle, who would eventually build a career narrating darkness for a laughing nation. The persona that would become Elvira did not arrive fully formed. It was assembled from late-night movie marathons, jukeboxed showrooms, cramped green rooms, and the stubborn streak of someone who would not be defined by one moment, however searing. What follows is not a straight ascent. It's a series of small reinventions. Las Vegas taught her how to hold a crowd and hide her loneliness beneath glitter. Europe taught her mobility and the odd liberties of a traveling performer. Los Angeles taught her how to make mischief into a brand. Along the way, she learned the rules of survival in the entertainment world, how to sharpen a joke, how to lean into audience expectation, and how to make a costume feel like armor. And then, in a studio that smelled of dust and projector lamp, a local television slot met Cassandra's particular appetite for the grotesque and the absurd. The result was a character that wore camp like couture and sarcasm like a cape. Elvira was equal parts gag and gospel. She mocked the cheap horror of late-night cinema while insisting, with a wink, that it mattered. The wink became a trademark. The voice became a vehicle. This is a story about reinvention, yes, but it is also about longevity, about a woman who converted private scars into a public myth and then, crucially, fought to protect that myth when the business world tried to strip it away. In the chapters ahead, we'll move from the kitchen to the strip, from the comedy clubs to the courtroom, following the arcs that made a late-night hostess into a cultural figure. We will watch how a single costume became a constellation and how the woman inside it chose, again and again, to step into the light.
Before Cassandra Peterson ever walked onto a stage, her body had already survived the kind of pain most never imagine. She was only 2 when a pot of boiling water tipped from the stove and spilled across her tiny frame. The burns were catastrophic. Over a third of her body scarred, her future uncertain. Doctors warned she might not live, and if she did, she might never look normal. But Cassandra lived, and though the pain lingered long after the bandages came off, so did something else: defiance. As she grew, the other kids stared, whispered, asked questions she learned to dodge with humor. She found that laughter could deflect pity better than silence ever could. She became fascinated with the things most children avoided: monsters, haunted houses, late-night horror hosts who turned fear into entertainment. On the family television, she'd watch flickering black and white creatures stumble through fog and shadows, feeling oddly comforted by them. The monsters didn't judge. They were outcasts, just like her. In that strange companionship, a seed was planted. She didn't know it then, but the very imagery that frightened others, darkness, fangs, the grotesque, would one day become her armor. Cassandra began to understand that fear could be funny, that horror could be home. Years later, she would tell audiences about those early days with a sly smile, downplaying the pain, elevating the irony. But behind every quip was the memory of that hospital room, that sense of fragility she refused to let define her. The fire that nearly ended her life had also ignited something impossible to extinguish: her fascination with transformation. It was this spark, buried beneath scar tissue and stubborn optimism, that one day would find its reflection under stage lights and camera lenses. Because for Cassandra Peterson, darkness wasn't something to escape, it was something to master. By 17, Cassandra Peterson was restless. too restless for Kansas, too ambitious for small-town safety. So she did the unthinkable. She packed her dreams, her scars, and a stubborn kind of hope, and boarded a bus bound for Las Vegas. The Strip in the early 1970s was a neon mirage. Sequins, cigarette smoke, and the constant hum of slot machines. She was still technically a teenager when she landed her first job as a showgirl at the Dunes Hotel, performing in the revue Vive les Girls. She stood in the wings, the lights blinding, the costumes heavy, and thought, I made it. Vegas dazzled and devoured in equal measure. Nights blurred into dawns, routines into repetition. She learned to balance on heels that pinched, to paste on smiles that never quite reached her eyes. But beneath the layers of glitter and rehearsed glamour, something real was forming. Discipline, confidence, and the quiet knowledge that applause was both intoxicating and fleeting. In those smoky backstage corridors, she met drag queens, dancers, and outsiders who accepted her without hesitation. They teased, encouraged, and sometimes mothered her. Among them, she found a strange kind of family, a world where performance wasn't just entertainment, but survival. Vegas was her crucible. It toughened her voice, sharpened her humor, and taught her that the most dazzling masks often hid the deepest truths. And though the city sparkled endlessly, Cassandra sought the stirrings of restlessness again. There had to be something more than sequins and spotlights, something with soul. As she looked out across the glittering skyline one night, the neon buzzing in the desert air, she promised herself this wasn't the end of her story, it was only rehearsal. When the desert lights began to feel like a cage, Cassandra did what few Vegas showgirls dared. She left it all behind and bought a one-way ticket to Europe. The flight felt like an escape, but also a blank page. In Italy, she found herself reborn among strangers who spoke with their hands, laughed too loud, and stayed up long after midnight.
She joined a local rock band, performing in smoky clubs where sweat and guitar feedback filled the air. She wasn't the girl from Kansas anymore. She was the mysterious American singer with fire in her eyes and stories she never told. Night after night, she discovered new pieces of herself, a voice that could command a room, a persona that thrived under the chaos of stage lights. Then, fate, as if scripted by some unseen director, handed her an unexpected cameo. One evening, she met the great Federico Fellini. The legendary filmmaker saw something in her presence, an unpolished spark, and cast her in his 1972 film Roma. It was a small role, but for Cassandra, it was a revelation. Watching Fellini work, she understood that performance could be more than spectacle. It could be art. Europe gave her something America never had: freedom to experiment without judgment. She learned that identity wasn't fixed. It could evolve, costume to costume, city to city. When she finally returned to the United States, she carried with her a quiet confidence and a taste for reinvention. The Vegas girl had learned discipline. The Italian traveler had found expression. Now all she needed was a stage that could merge the two. And that stage, though she didn't know it yet, was waiting for her in Los Angeles, behind the doors of a small, irreverent comedy theater where misfits turned laughter into legacy. Los Angeles in the late 1970s was a playground for dreamers, and Cassandra Peterson had arrived armed with every lesson pain and performance had taught her. She joined the Groundlings, an improv comedy troupe where the absurd was sacred and nothing was off limits. Nights were spent in cramped rehearsal rooms, laughing until her ribs ached, learning how to twist the strange into something funny. Among the troupe, she built characters as outrageous as they were clever. Quick wit became her weapon, confidence her shield. The once shy girl from Kansas was now commanding laughter from packed crowds. But as she sharpened her comedic instincts, she could feel something brewing, a persona that wanted out, something bigger, darker, and bolder. Then fate, as if scripted by some unseen director, handed her an unexpected cameo. One evening, she met the legendary filmmaker Federico Fellini. The legendary filmmaker saw something in her presence, an unpolished spark, and cast her in his 1972 film, Roma. It was a small role, but for Cassandra, it was a revelation. Watching Fellini work, she understood that performance could be more than spectacle. It could be art. Europe gave her something America never had: freedom to experiment without judgment. She learned that identity wasn't fixed. It could evolve, costume to costume, city to city. When she finally returned to the United States, she carried with her a quiet confidence and a taste for reinvention. The Vegas girl had learned discipline. The Italian traveler had found expression. Now all she needed was a stage that could merge the two. And that stage, though she didn't know it yet, was waiting for her in Los Angeles, behind the doors of a small, irreverent comedy theater where misfits turned laughter into legacy. Los Angeles in the late 1970s was a playground for dreamers, and Cassandra Peterson had arrived armed with every lesson pain and performance had taught her. She joined the Groundlings, an improv comedy troupe where the absurd was sacred and nothing was off limits. Nights were spent in cramped rehearsal rooms, laughing until her ribs ached, learning how to twist the strange into something funny. Among the troupe, she built characters as outrageous as they were clever. Quick wit became her weapon, confidence her shield. The once shy girl from Kansas was now commanding laughter from packed crowds. But as she sharpened her comedic instincts, she could feel something brewing, a persona that wanted out, something bigger, darker, and bolder. Then, in 1981, came the call that changed everything. A local Los Angeles TV station was searching for a new host for its late-night horror program, Movie Macabre. They wanted someone different, someone who could make fun of old monster flicks without losing the audience's affection. Cassandra auditioned, not yet realizing the gravity of that moment. She arrived wearing a handmade black gown that hugged her frame like smoke, a towering beehive wig, and a grin that dared anyone to underestimate her. When the cameras rolled, she didn't play the part, she owned it. Her voice dripped with sarcasm, her jokes danced between flirtation and mockery, and her confidence filled the studio. Elvira was born. That day, part vampire, part vaudeville comedian, all attitude. The name, the look, the voice, they fused into something electric. Cassandra had created not just a character, but a paradox. A woman who could be both the joke and the punchline, the danger and the delight. Within weeks, Elvira's Movie Macabre hit the airwaves. The response was instant. Audiences didn't just watch her, they adored her. In a world that tried to box women into being beautiful or funny, Cassandra had written a new rule. She could be both, and terrifyingly good at it. Elvira was supposed to be a local novelty, a midnight companion for horror fans who loved bad movies and good jokes. But Cassandra's creation had other plans. Within months, Elvira's Movie Macabre became a phenomenon. Posters sold out. Fans quoted her one-liners. By Halloween, her image was everywhere, on t-shirts, beer ads, calendars, and collectibles. She wasn't just hosting horror flicks anymore. She had become part of pop culture's bloodstream. Beneath the makeup and the teasing grin, Cassandra remained the architect of it all, writing, performing, designing, shaping every smirk and pun that left Elvira's lips. The more successful she became, the more fiercely she protected her creation. But that success drew attention and conflict.
When others tried to claim ownership of the Elvira name, Cassandra fought back. The legal battles were long and draining, but she refused to surrender what she had built from the ground up. In interviews, she stayed composed, witty as ever, while behind the scenes, she was fighting for creative survival. When the ruling finally came down in her favor, it was more than a legal victory. It was validation, proof that the woman beneath the wig was not just a performer, but a businesswoman, a writer, a visionary. The 1988 feature film, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, sealed her place in cult history. Critics didn't know what to make of it, half parody, half empowerment anthem, But the audience understood. It was bold, unapologetic, and irresistibly funny. For Cassandra, it was her declaration of independence, a love letter to every misfit who had ever felt like too much for their surroundings. As the years went on, the character evolved with her. Television gave way to conventions and Halloween specials. The costume remained the same, but the message deepened. Elvira had started as satire and grown into a symbol, proof that a woman could own her sexuality, her humor, and her power without apology. And through it all, Cassandra never forgot the little girl who once watched monsters from behind scarred skin and hospital bandages. The world that once frightened her was now her empire. Off-screen, Cassandra Peterson was finally ready to step out of the shadows she'd spent decades mastering. In her 2021 memoir, Yours Cruelly, Elvira, she revealed what fans had never known, that for nearly 20 years, she had shared her life with a woman, Teresa T. Weirson. The confession wasn't scandal, it was liberation. After decades of playing a character who celebrated darkness with a wink, Cassandra was now standing fully in her own light. Fans who had grown up laughing with Elvira embraced her truth without hesitation. Today, Cassandra looks back on her journey, the burns, the stages, the lawsuits, the laughter, and sees not tragedy or luck, but transformation. The woman who once hid